Hey everybody, Guy Magno here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We're so appreciative to have you here. I just got done filming the podcast with Garret Lathe, Mr. Lathe, my high school choir conductor, and the founder and artistic director of the Youth Chorale of Central Minnesota. And we got to talk about, believe it or not, we got to talk about choir and art and why that's important in a community and why it's important for kids and young students to participate in those kinds of activities. Making music together is such a valuable part of a community. And so hearing him get to talk about that was really, really fun. So we're thankful that you guys are here. We've said it before, I'll say it again. Our commitment is that we're going to make 52 of these podcasts. We're going to release one every week for an entire year, and we're going to see what we have. But our goal, it isn't really, we're not looking to solve the world's problems. We call it Chit Chat because what we're trying to do is we're just trying to have really great conversations with people that are from our community, that love our community, and are trying to make our community better. And so that's exactly what that is today, a nice conversation with my friend and former teacher, Mr. Lathe. Excited for you to hear it now. Garret, thanks for joining us on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Even as I said Garret right there, because we're friends and we refer to each other with first names, which is like a pretty normal friend thing to do, it did feel weird because I have known you since I was a sophomore in high school when you were my college conductor, or my high school choir conductor, and you were Mr. Lathe. And so it's an old habits die hard thing, but I do try to, because we're like actually friends now, to call you that. But Mr. Lathe,
yes.
Garret, thanks for coming. We really, really appreciate you coming. I'm going to pour us a little cup of coffee.
Awesome.
We're drinking a medium roast here today.
All right.
And from what I gather, you're no room for cream.
No room.
Drink it black and hot kind of guy.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Get as much out of it as you can.
It's great.
And you are to the brim guy, I see.
Here's the deal. As I was saying, no room for cream thing, I just went too far. It was it was an issue.
No room for air.
But we navigated it, and you did a really good job sipping off the top there. Okay, well, Garret, would you just introduce yourself? Who are you? Tell us kind of what you do, where you work, and we'd just love to meet you a little bit.
Sure. Well, I was born at a very early age in Canada.
He's a dad, everybody. He's a dad.
Yep.
Actually, Canada?
Yeah, I was.
Really?
Yep. I spent 5 days of my life there.
Nuh-uh.
Yep.
This is so fun. Sophomore. Let's see. Sophomore, I was probably like 14, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm 28 years. I've known you a long time in Canada. What a fun thing to learn.
Yep.
Where in Canada were you born?
Winkler, Manitoba, which is south of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
My parents lived in Walhalla, North Dakota, not Valhalla, but Walhalla. There's a ski hill in Walhalla, believe it or not.
All right.
It's right on the edge of the Red River Valley, and the closest hospital was in Canada. And so at that time of the 70s, if you lived in Walhalla, you were born. If your parents lived in Walhalla, you were born in Canada because that was the closest hospital.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And because it was just because you needed the hospital, like any sort of like citizenship or any of that stuff.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Like they're not going to say, oh no, sorry, you're an American or you're a U.S. citizen.
No. But I'm saying, do you have dual citizenship?
I would have. I'm a little bit bitter for my parents. They naturalized me when I was 5.
Okay.
And so I could have chosen citizenship. When I was 18, or gotten a dual, I could have maintained my dual citizenship.
Yeah.
But my parents naturalized me. Thought, we're true red-blooded Americans, and we're going to make you an American citizen. And really doesn't make any. I can still vote. I can, But I mean, Canada is so desperate for people. I just have to live there for 30 days, and I'm a citizen. So because I was born there,
Really?
But, yeah, and I actually a few years ago. I renewed my passport. So I'm like, I need to get my birth certificate because my parents, couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And I actually had to get my birth certificate from Canada, which they're on paper that is just beautiful, beautiful paper.
Really?
Which has nothing to do with anything, but it's kind of a cool process. The funny thing is my kids, my children, I joke with them all the time, and they saw a screensaver when they were little of on my computer that was a picture of the Earth from the moon, and they didn't understand that there's just stock photos. And they said, "Dad, where'd you get that?" And I said, "Well, I was an astronaut before I met your mom."
Yeah.
And they're like, "No way!" And of course, Holly played along, like, "Yeah, he was an astronaut." And then when I told them I was born in Canada,
They didn't believe you.
they did not believe me.
Yeah, right. Not.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you lied to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I set them
Shattered
up for
childhood
Yep,
dreams.
Yep. But they are now skeptics.
That's
so.
right. Okay, so born in Canada.
Yep. Always grew up in North Dakota, Minnesota, and became a choir director.
Yeah.
I had foundational experiences in high school.
Yeah.
And actually took over for my teacher one day in class. I think I've told you this story. Took over for my teacher who went on an early maternity leave. I thought this would be good for laughs because I was kind of the class clown, and got up to conduct because there was no music sub, and that was it. That was the day.
Hooked.
Yep.
That's so fun.
Yeah, and my day job is teaching in Sauk Rapids Rice Middle School, middle schoolers. I've taught in Sartell for 12 years, where I met you, and then various paths was getting too much for my side gig and my real job, and so I worked in business for 4 years, and then that ended, and so my maturity stopped in 7th grade. So I finally found my people. So,
That's right. Back to middle school.
yeah, but the day job is I'm very passionate about it. Love it. My side gig is the Youth Chorale of Central Minnesota, which I started 20 years ago now.
Oh my.
Yeah. So you know what that means? You graduated more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, I do know that.
Yeah. I thought I'd just bring that up for you.
I mean, I think it's 20 years and a couple of days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because our 20th is coming up here in the next, I don't know, sometime this summer. I think it's at a bar in the middle of nowhere, St. Stephen.
Makes sense.
I think it does make sense. I think I'm gonna go. I don't know a ton of those kids. I guess they were kids at the time. We're now 38-year-old adults, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so the Youth Chorale of Central Minnesota. Would you just tell us a little bit more about it? I had the joy and pleasure of serving on the board for 3 or 4 years, I think. But yeah, would you just tell us a little bit more about how you started it, why you started it, and why is it important to have community choirs like this?
Yeah. So I'll give you the elevator pitch if I can think of it quick enough. But it's what we're in the kind of the mode of finding our values, which we're not doing as a study. We're just doing it as organically finding the stories that resonate with our singers, with our patrons, with our board members, to distill our values. And what it's coming down to is we create core memories for singers, for individuals in Central Minnesota that give meaning to their experiences in high school, to give them direction in the future, not necessarily direction that's guided towards being a musician or being a professional musician, but keeping music as a part of their life. But the most important thing, community and connection as a part of their life. And that really is the essence of why we exist. We create community and connection based on the core memories that we create through music. But we all know that the rehearsal is the biggest part of the process, where you're creating, where you're digging into the music and making those connections. Those connections happen in concerts, but they really happen shoulder to shoulder, musician to musician in rehearsals. So the start of it, I always had this idea, actually when you were in school, of having kind of like this all-state choir, but I was thinking like in the summer, but not all-state kids. All-state is a program for those that aren't aware. It's like you were an all-state, where you audition and you go with about 100 in each choir. There's 3 choirs. You go and perform. You have a week-long camp and you perform for a final concert with these amazing musicians. And
I mean, one of the ways to maybe think about it is like how cool kids are trying to get to state in basketball or football or something. Nerdy kids are trying to get to state with their voice, and that's what that is.
Yep. and so I was hoping to create something like that more on a regional, not in a state, to the Central Minnesota area, And so I had this idea, took it to Brother Paul, who, Brother Paul, he's the founder of the Boys Choir. I went to a conference there, and so I told him this idea, and he said, why don't you do that during the year on Sunday nights and rehearse here? And I literally said,
Okay.
it's done.
Yeah.
And that really, so I quote unquote the founder, but the idea's been out there.
Right.
It just was, right person, hopefully the right person in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Ideas are easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, if you pull an average group of people, just like put 5 or 10 people together and just said, all right, we've got 2 days. What are some ideas that'll make the world better? They're all there.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
there's not a lot new that isn't there. It's that kind of special blend of someone being willing to kind of have the moxie for it, have the connections for it, and
And the stupidity just to do it without even thinking.
that's right.
Just like,
there is legitimately so much.
there's so much stupidity. Wait, no.
I think we say naivety.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the
Yep.
the little nicer word for that, but there's some stupidity for sure associated with that.
Yeah. And as far as ideas, I mean, if it was just about the ideas, I would have been the inventor of the GPS guided troll motor. Like, it's probably 25 years ago.
Really?
Like back when there was Garmins.
Yeah.
Like the Garmins you'd pull out, they were about,
Yeah.
bigger than the newest or the oldest cell phone.
Yeah.
And that if you could connect this with a trolling motor and a depth chart.
You could navigate this entire lake.
Yeah.
Take me to the fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, it's not about the ideas, it's about implementing the ideas. Oops, that's going to be a nice solid bump in the audio.
When we're going to just pivot for a hard second around GPS, okay? When I was a junior in college, that would have been probably like 2007-ish, smartphones weren't really a thing yet. Maybe the iPhone had just come out, but like nobody had them. And to navigate, it was still primarily maps. And then there were these weird people that had like GPS at this point. Maybe it was 2006. There was some GPS units, but very few people had one. And me and a few of my buddies from college, spring break that year, we put some names in a hat of cities that we wanted to go to. And then we just drew a name. And then that's the city that we went to for spring break. Because in college, that's the kind of crazy stuff you do.
Yep.
It's more about like kind of the going on a fun trip. And Boston, Massachusetts was one of them. And so Boston got drawn, and a friend of ours, his brother had, so we were told this friend of ours, his brother had one of these GPS devices. And through this friend, the brother lent it to us. And I remember telling my dad was a driver. He just like loved driving, loved maps. And I told him like, we're going to take a GPS. And he said, but also a map, right? I was like, I think we're just going to trust it. And so the technology was still brand new. It was so early. And we just trusted it, plugged in the little address, and even in like downtown Boston, all these weird little one-ways, and it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The one little thing about early GPS technology, it was really gimmicky. And you could choose the voice that you wanted. Maybe this is still a thing, but we chose John Cleese. The comedian, British comedian John Cleese, and he would make jokes while he's telling you where to go. So like one of them was, in 500 feet, bear to the right. And then he would say, bear to the right. And then it was always like, and horse to the left. So he would make these little puns, or he'd say something and then make a weird little pun with it. And then at one point he would say, you might be thinking to yourself, is this really John Cleese? And he said, well, let's ask my mother. And then he impersonated his mother, or he would say like, Mom, is this actually me, John Cleese? And she said, oh, why, yes. Something really crazy. I don't know if that can make it. The like kind of old lady British accent. And he said, there you go. There you have it, folks. It's actually me, John Cleese. This is playing while you're driving. Like this little commentary. Again, they worked out the fact like we actually don't need any of this silly, gimmicky stuff. But anyway,
well, then they create a podcast to keep you awake. So
that's right.
So
we are downstream. We are downstream of John Cleese impersonating his mother. Wow, this is really good. Okay, so Brother Paul encouraged you to start the Youth Chorale, and how long after that conversation with him before the first rehearsal happened?
It was a year and 3 months, 2 months.
Yeah.
So that was in like June of 2004. Then we were incorporated April 2005.
Yeah.
April 12th. And first audition was in May of that 2005, and we started our first rehearsal August 2005.
That's really, really great.
Yeah.
What's different about the Youth Chorale in comparison to like other high school choirs and maybe even some of the other like singing opportunities that students might have in Central Minnesota?
Well, it's really, if you come from a larger program, there's not as much difference, but it's still worth the time. What I would talk about with, I taught Sartell for 12 years, and so some of those kids, we run block schedules, so they had hour and a half of choir. Sometimes they're in 2 choirs and a teacher's assistant. So I'd see them like 3 hours a day, and then 2 hours on Sunday for rehearsal. So I saw them more than their family did. But for those kids, they came to Youth Chorale on Sunday nights in a different mindset than on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, because choir was between social studies and science. And those are all good things, but nobody walks into school for the sole purpose of choir.
Yeah.
They might want to walk into a school just for choir, but there's other.
It's not the reality.
That's not why schools exist. As much as I'd like to, I'd love to. All of our schools are singing schools. Everybody's in choir. Job security. But when you, it's like in life, when you set a time aside and go do something, your whole purpose of getting in the car and going there, you're in a different mindset, and that mindset is to just dig deep in the one thing that you want to do. And so if you're from a remote school, you might be the only tenor in your choir,
Right.
or the only senior, or there just a lot of our square mile areas. 2,500 square miles. That's what we draw from, all the way from Little Falls and Osakis down to Monticello. Just a large area. And so for those schools that are coming in from remote areas, it's really their opportunity for that next level choir. So that's a reason enough. If you love singing, this is the place to get that next level experience. But even those that come from really good programs, it's that set aside time. And it's also because it's 2 hours a week, where in Sartell I had kids hour and a half a day, so I can't do math fast, but that's 7.5 hours a week. That's a lot of rehearsal time. But in 2 hours, you have to pack in a lot of content and also leave room for people to connect. And so it's just this dedicated time where you're just going to get things done. And it's really, it just creates that connection that it's in some sense deeper than high school. High school, you're also connecting over lunch, over this class, over that class. But when you're there just for that short purpose, you might see someone in Target or somewhere and you might not even remember their name, but you have this connection, and it's in some ways a deeper connection because it's less superficial and more in depth, if that makes sense, because it's less about just spending time together and about creating some incredible music together.
I think there is also something neat about the fact that no one is happening into this thing. Whereas like maybe in a school setting, it is an elective, but you're also going to be in the building from 8 to 3 or whatever that is anyway. And so I might as well kind of do that, even if it's not exactly my thing. Maybe there's a little bit of external pressure or something. But with a program like this, like you really got to love, this has to really be your thing. If you're going to give up Sunday nights and commit to practicing, beforehand and maybe go on a little tour or whatever that is, you have to care about it in a different kind of way. And so there is something fun kind of about the buy-in, I think, that you have. I'm showing up, and I know that the other kids around me, they care about this in a similar kind of way than I do, which you don't necessarily have in a school program.
Yeah, I like how you said it. What did you say? What was the first thing you said? It's there's something about happening. It's just not a happening thing. there's a way you put it that was really good. I'll have to listen to this podcast because that'd be good for our marketing materials. And one of the struggles is, in the teenage brain, and, sometimes adult brains do say, well, Youth Chorale is so much better than my high school choir. And that's exactly the wrong message because, well, for one, it better be, because it is these people that are really dedicated. But it's not about the quality. It's about the intent and the depth. And I always tried to promote, and I still, it's sometimes hard in middle school, because middle schoolers are crazy. If you haven't, you'll find out soon enough. Every kid that walks through my door, whether it's Youth Chorale or middle school or high school, I always assume the best intent, that they are in here for musical reasons.
Yep.
They want to be a better musician. And it might be buried under a lot of stuff, and there's those cases where they really don't.
Yeah.
But it's just what percentage, everyone says, well, everybody in my choir is there for the A. It's easy to get an A, so I'm going to join choir, or I need an arts credit. You know what? It's a lot easier to go take an art class than it is to take a choir class.
Right.
So anybody who says that is full of it. It's like, I'm just here for the art credit. Go take art. It's a lot easier, So they're there, and it can be that connection. It can be because my friends are doing it. But somewhere under there's that desire, like, I kind of want to be good.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to. That's one of the hard messaging things for us to impart to our own singers, is say, don't think of it along the lines of, this is better than my high school experience, or the other kids in my choirs are not there for the right reasons. Those kind of status and judgmental reasons for why this is good, because that elitism is what separates people, rather than saying, no, how about just focus on, this is something that we're here to do well.
And you also can't do what you guys do on Sunday nights without those programs.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
you just build on those programs. If those teachers aren't in the classroom 5 days a week doing that thing, you have no product in the community, because you don't have any singers that are growing and developing that talent. And so I think thinking about that like a partnership is really, really valuable, rather than like we're in competition with these high school programs. And I mean, again, being on the board, but I've just heard you talk about that so much, and the way that you talk about the value of these other conductors in each of these communities, whether they're big programs or not, is really, really cool. I think there's something special about music, and sports has a piece of this too, but I don't know. And maybe it's just because like it's so much of my upbringing, but there is something so special about like the emotional and relational connection that comes with working together in that way. And again, I know on a football team, you got to work together in some neat kinds of ways too. But when you're sitting in choir next to each other and you're singing, you're putting yourselves out there in a creative kind of way, which is so close. It just touches so close to like kind of the center of who we are. And doing that thing together with that kind of vulnerability, if you actually give it that thing, is so special. And what you're able to create doing that with humility is really, really special. Really, really special.
Yeah. And I think that's the essence of body, mind, and spirit. I think, with the exception of our one daughter with a disability, we always, required to a certain point, and then until they're at a certain age, required that our kids try a sport, and of course do their best academically. And their best doesn't mean a grade. Their best means that you are striving. And then an arts activity. Obviously, as two choir director parents, didn't have to really highly encourage the arts. The sports were a little more of the like, no, you're gonna do this, and especially, you might not know this if you're just listening to this podcast. I am actually a crack athlete. If you're watching the video, you know that I'm flat out lying. But I wasn't exactly the strongest athlete in school. I still did sports, but to keep all three active, to keep mind, body, and spirit active, and there's obviously many ways to keep your spirit active, but that is that getting to that core of who you are.
Yeah.
And you can find that on the football field. You can find that on the tennis court. But the arts is where you are putting yourself out there, even visual arts, but especially performing arts.
Yeah.
And it's unified purpose, where there's a dual purpose.
Yeah.
There's a competing purpose in sports. There's going to be someone who goes home sad.
Yeah.
You know, and when you go to a concert, hopefully no one will. The only reason to be sad is that it's done.
Yeah.
You know, not somebody didn't lose, and so that unified effort really it changes the game. And that's like whenever I'm in an interview team for education, it's I always have my lens of being that performing arts person, and like, have you had these experiences? So you know that this is just as important, because our culture so highly values sports, and I'm not saying that the value should be less, but it should be on par with performing arts.
Yeah.
And visual arts too, but with performing arts.
I think at the end of a sporting event, when if you give it everything, right? Which every coach wants their students to, and the best coaches, they'll say, like, that's all I need you to do. Just give it everything you have. It's the only thing I can ask you for. That's all good, right? And if a kid actually goes and does that, and they put it all out on the line there, at the end of it, there isn't a question of like, but did the person that watched me do that? But like, do they like me? Right? And I think there's something about when you ask a kid in performing arts, right? I'm going to have you stand on that stage. I just want you to just give it everything you got, and you're going to sing a solo. I think there's this thing at the end. It's like, it isn't just like, did I execute the task? Did I kick that ball into that net or whatever? It's, and do you like me? Did this thing that is so deep inside my soul, like, did it resonate with you? Like, those little things are just unique to the arts. And I wish more people would participate in that, and even adults, like adults. If you have never had that opportunity before, I would strongly recommend going and giving a shot. I forget the exact statistic, maybe you know it, but it's something like 95 or 96% of all human beings have the mechanical capacity for high-level musical training and performance. Like, it's something that can be worked on. There are very few people that actually like are so tone deaf that they actually can't participate in music. It's so rare. So if you're sitting there saying like, well, I can't do that, statistically, it's unlikely that it's actually you. But jumping into something and giving it a shot and kind of feeling what it's like to kind of put yourself out in that way and do it alongside of other people, it's such a special experience.
And I haven't heard that statistic, but I do know, like, tone deaf really isn't a thing. It doesn't exist, because if you were tone deaf, you wouldn't understand whether your mother was mad at you or not,
right?
Because that is all pitch. It is all frequency related. It's interesting. Little side story. Western languages, and almost all languages, are not tonal based. Some Eastern languages are tonal based. My neighbor, he and his wife, the mother-in-law of the husband and the mom of the wife, she's Chinese, from China, and they talk, and he speaks Mandarin. And when they're in the yard gardening, it sounds like they're yelling across, like across the yard, and they sound just ticked off at each other. So I'm like, do you guys like not get along? And he's like, not understanding, like, you guys are yelling at each other. Like, he's like, no, we're not. And finally got down to it. If you change the pitch in Mandarin, you change the actual meaning of the word.
Right.
Where so you have to say, if I don't want to blow out your audio, and if I'm yelling at you across the parking lot, go, hey guy, how's it going? But if it was in a tonal language, say, hey guy, how's it going? And it sounds either very flat or mad. But all of our language is based on pitch, so everyone has that capacity to understand and perceive pitch. It's just a matter of whether the synaptic connection stayed through your childhood, or whether there's not maintained because you didn't have a lot of exposure to music. But even if you didn't come from a musical home, those things can be rewired, because we have plastic brains that can brains with plasticity. They're not actually plastic, that can rewire.
Thankfully. So yeah, I mean, English isn't traditionally thought of as a tonal language, but we for sure, like like we for sure in our own kind of way are a tonal language. And here's a little example, right? I don't get asked anymore, what college did you go to? Because again, I'm 38 and I have the wrinkles in all the right places for a 38-year-old. And so I don't look like I'm just coming out of college, but there was this season of my life when I got asked all the time, like, oh, are you in school? Are you out of school? Like there's that season.
Yep.
And it was incredible. If I was in St. Paul, I would just say I went to Northwestern because I am in the town where the school is. Now, granted, if I was not in St. Paul, I would say, oh, I went to a small private Christian school called Northwestern, right? But if I was in St. Paul, I wouldn't think about that just because, like, hey, 4 blocks over is this school. And I had this exact conversation more times than I can count. Hey, guy, what school did you go to? Oh, I went to Northwestern. Oh. And then I'd say, oh, no, not that one. It's a small private Christian school just off of Snelling in Roseville. Oh. If you read that transcript, you wouldn't know the conversation. You wouldn't actually know the conversation. But if you heard that conversation, you know exactly what was said. Oh, the Northwestern, Illinois. Very nice. You're a smart kid. Okay, very nice. Oh, no. Sorry. No. It's not that one. It's the small private Christian school. Oh, okay. All right. Well, better luck next time. Yeah. And again, in English, if you just read that, you wouldn't know. But we do. We have a very, very tonal language.
Yeah.
And anyone who's ever disciplined a child before also knows that, or had conflict with a spouse.
Yep.
Oh, that is not what you just said there. Like that. There's a lot more. There is a lot more to that sentence than what was said right there.
Yeah. And again, another reason for performing arts. I think you learn the nuances, especially given our move to communicating mostly by going backwards and communicating mostly by written rather than or emojied rather than actual conversation.
Yeah.
You learn more context of communication through performing arts like theater and music.
Question for you.
Answer, blue.
It's good. When you email and or text, do you use what you would call a normal amount of exclamation marks or an added amount, a bonus amount, a copious amount?
I never, unless it's major, never more than one in a sentence.
Okay.
Never double.
All right.
Never double. But there's no more than a 2 to 3 ratio. 2 exclamations for 3 sentences.
All right. So I think I can get by with all of that. I'll for sure, with the exception of, I'll put 2 at the end. And I realize, it's been kind of brought to my attention, but I use a disproportionate amount of exclamation marks in comparison to what would, I think, be in normal email communication. And maybe it is because of some of the music stuff, some of the tonal things. I know that depending on the mood you're in when you read this email, you could infer things about my tone that I don't mean.
Yep.
And so I want to use the tools that I have available to me to make sure that you know that I am not mad or whatever it is. I want to, even kind of effusive language, like, hey, how you doing? I put more of that in my professional correspondence than I think is in most normal correspondence. Because I want to make sure that you know that I'm smiling as I type this email. That's even something that I'll kind of tell our staff to do is make sure you smile as you type that. Especially if it if there's the possibility, man, we're deep in a project, and again, there's no conflict here, but we're going back and forth on some of these details, and we're in the minutia of it. Smile while you type it. Just give yourself the best chance of this person knowing that you are happy and that you're happy with them and that you're not upset or angry or
I always email is tone deaf, and I'm a firm if it's any kind of something that can be read into or that's not that I don't even want to say conflict, could be interpreted interpreted as like you're not happy with me or
Yeah.
we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
If it's over 5 sentences, it's a phone call.
Yeah.
And I'm old, like I didn't realize how old school that is. Like to actually, I've helped my kids through conflict and like, just pick up the phone. Dad, we don't do that.
Yeah.
No, like,
Yeah.
but start it. Like, no, like it's not allowed.
And so are you saying like even like with friends, like conflict between peers?
Yeah, 2 teenage
Yeah.
peers, like,
Yeah.
you don't pick up the phone.
Right.
Like, so you can FaceTime, like that, and that's like, that works.
Yeah.
FaceTime works, because then you.
Even better. Better.
Yeah, because then you see nonverbals. But with emails, I do, even in professional emails, I do the :parenthesis.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, I'm sorry, even if you have a doctor after your name,
Yeah.
or other
You're
initials,
smiling. You're winking.
yeah, I'm smiling, I'm winking at you because this is what I do if I was
Yeah.
at a coffee shop with
Yeah.
you.
Yep. I think the way I feel about it is, and in so many things, if that kind of thing is so off-putting to you, we're probably not a good fit anyway. And like, if that kind of thing, like if you need this thing to be so stuffy and so put together that like there isn't room for a little bit of that thing, if it's not this, we're gonna bump into something later. And so,
Yeah.
self-select out quicker.
Yeah, I've done some, working with some agents in East Coast. East Coast is a little bristly with that.
Oh yeah, big
like,
time.
Like, no, why would you do that in an
Yep.
email? I think maybe it's, I don't know. I have a theory that it's, population density related, but that's just me.
I mean, Midwest for sure has a vibe.
Yeah.
And here's more than anything, I have a vibe. And so like, I'm gonna, like, if in this email, if this is bristling, if my little couple of exclamation marks, whatever, if this is bristling to you in an email,
Yeah.
we're really not gonna, like, by the time we get in person,
Yeah.
this is not gonna be,
Yeah.
this is not gonna be your thing.
Yeah, yeah. And if like an automatic win, if there's some office reference within the first 3 emails with somebody, it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Best friends.
it doesn't matter how many exclamation
Yeah.
points you use or don't use.
One of my business partners, Taylor, I bet you on an average day, he and I might text. I mean, it seriously could be 20 times a day, or even as I say that sounds light. On busy days, maybe it's hundreds of times that we're exchanging information, and early. I mean, he and I have been working together now for about 9 years, and early we realized like we have to do so much communication. We do so much over texting that what we need for this medium, this communication medium, is we need it to be information delivery. And so we promised each other early, like if there is any hint of conflict, like if there's something that's like a little heavy about this, like we're gonna pick up the phone, we're gonna call, or we're just gonna do it the next time we see each other, so that we can ruthlessly use this form of really easy, wonderful content delivery called texting. We can do it really ruthlessly. I don't need to ask how you're doing.
Yep.
I don't need to like check in on your wife and kids and all this
Yep.
stuff, which I want to do. And I'm going to do that as soon as I see you in person. But right now, I just need to know, is that meeting still at that time? And we're going to do that thing so many times that if we did some of these other niceties, it would be
Inefficient.
Inefficient. And so I think if you went and just like read through, like if I just handed you our phone and you just like read through our texts, you would think to yourself, I'm not sure what's happening here. They text in an amount like people that like each other, but it doesn't really sound.
There's no connective tissue.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like they like each other here.
Yeah.
And it's because we had to do that early, like that we're good, right? Like we're gonna. And every once in a while, like my wife will like see a text that I wrote, and she's like, "Are you mad at him?" I'm like, "No. Why would you?" Oh yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
knowing your audience is also valuable, and I can maybe use a little bit more of that in some of my professional life as well, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so Youth Chorale, Central Minnesota, it's 20 years old. I'm guessing when you started it, like getting it off the ground is so hard. Getting anything off the ground is so hard. Imagining 20 years would kind of be crazy. Like, what will this thing be like in 20 years? But I think you did the hardest 20 are behind you. If you're looking ahead, what do you think the next 20 years of the Youth Chorale look like?
Well, I've got the vision planning document that I probably can't share, but like all the under the hood stuff. But I'll give you I think some of the things include. Well, let me backtrack. I frame it a little bit. I wish I would have chose a different name.
Okay.
And thought bigger. like youth choirs of Central Minnesota, or because chorale, like,
It's singular.
it's singular. It's, and my vision at that time was a singular ensemble, and that was probably the most short-sighted thing of the whole process, because right now we have one, two, three, four, five regular ensembles, and then we have all these outreach things that are like the Kids Sing and the Treble Fest, and we're looking at possibly doing some camps, and so it would have been a lot easier just as an organization to think bigger organizationally and maybe have a youth chorale, but that's one part of this kind of ecosystem. But what I see in the future is us being partners with the community in building ensembles that don't exist yet. So like going to Washington Elementary. I don't think there's a Washington Elementary around here, and saying, hey, can we help you start in an after-school choir that is accessible to all, that doesn't rely on transportation or money or this, but can we engage in helping you help your community to sing? And then that all does filter into a larger youth chorale organization, but also makes singing, puts singing on par with other activities in the area, as far as like, this is an option. This is something that we just do as a community, that we sing.
Yeah.
Like there's just an expectation. And then also building into the future, like at some point having a more permanent alumni choir or an alumni and friends choir that is still revolved around lifelong singing, does not compete with Minnesota Center Chorale or Great River Chorale, but just some way for everyone from the earliest age to the oldest age to have access to singing in a way that makes sense to them. That's the other thing I forgot to mention about Youth Chorale. The one thing that's been kind of our why we've been so successful is that we stay in our lane. We're 2 hours a week, that's it. And so many activities, I won't throw any organizations or sports under the bus, but they require life, blood, sweat, and tears. I think there's a place for that, but there's something about being well-rounded and having access to singing in a way that fits your life. And if you want to go deeper, you can. But if you also want to be an athlete, you want to be in great theater, you want to be, you want to work part-time in high school, or, you're a doctor and you only can rehearse on these days or whatever, you can have access to singing, access to a community performing ensemble.
Man, that's really, really cool. Why couldn't you just change the name?
There's a process, you have to actually recharter, but it just is.
Is there not a DBA equivalent in nonprofits?
I bet there is, so yeah.
This feels, you've done the hardest thing over and over and over again for 20 years. And granted, I mean, this is my little world. This is the stuff I think about every day, but especially because you don't have to change your acronym. It sounds, this is low-hanging fruit. I think that's doable.
There's a little bit of brand loyalty, want to make sure that that we make sure our alumni, past patrons, past board, are connected with and brand loyalty. It doesn't sound right when you talk nonprofits, but we want to make sure that they still recognize us, that it's still on the brand, and it would be. And so it's just a matter of getting the pieces in place. And for any listener that's still on listening, there's this girls' choir, traditional girls' choir, Cantabile, that existed as a part of St. Cloud State University. And a couple of years ago, they decided that they weren't going to continue that program anymore, and we've now absorbed that program. And so we're already, Youth Chorale of Central Minnesota doesn't make sense for a third family of with a kid in third grade. Like, what's the Youth Chorale? What's a Youth Choral is usually, most people don't say chorale, but Youth Chorale isn't something that makes sense. So we're already at that stage where we're like, okay, what does this look like in the future?
Well, I love the youth chorale. I love youth singing. I love the arts being, front and center in our community. So really thankful that you started that 20 years ago. My one little regret is you didn't start it 24 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
The youth chorale is the exact kind of program that I would have been floored to have been a part of through my, my high school singing. And I mean, so I sang in a boys choir, through ninth grade. And then I went to college for singing and for choir. But there, through high school, with the exception of like what I did during school, there wasn't a lot at that time. There wasn't really a lot of options for me. So I did theater and all kinds of other musical things, but for that little season of my life, that was something that I think I kind of missed. So I'm really thankful now for all the other kids that are kind of like me, that's available to them and they're able to plug in and be involved in that kind of way. So
it's been good.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for coming on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it. We end every podcast with a segment that we call Unpaid Ad. Is there someone or something, some organization or business that you think deserves a little shout out today on the podcast?
That's a good one. Can I choose two?
You're the guest here.
Okay.
The guest gets what the guest wants.
All right. Okay, this is going to find out my value system pretty quick here, but both are restaurants. So one is just straight up awesome restaurant. Crew.
All right.
Crew. Oh my word.
In St. Joe.
Yep, St. Joe.
Wonderful.
New Orleans or Louisiana food, really, really, really good.
Yeah.
If you haven't been there, it's it's a anniversary that ends in a 5 or 0. At least on our budget, 5 or 0 anniversary. But it is a phenomenal place.
Yeah.
The other one is Jules.
Yeah.
And Danella, especially Danella. If you don't know a lot about Danella, owns Jules and gives to the community in ways that are never seen. I'd once tried to book Jules for catering something for the youth chorale, and it was on a Sunday because all our concerts are on Sundays. And she said, "Oh, you know what? That's the one Sunday that our staff feeds the homeless." Like, of course it is, because that's pretty much Danella. She does just a lot of things like that, and so her employees are just incredible human beings, and she just runs a really great, I don't even want to call it a restaurant, it's an organization.
Yeah, cool. I got to know her restaurant manager, Ryan. We were in chamber together, chamber leadership this past year, and he also was just such a fantastic dude. Yeah, they're doing some really, really neat stuff in our community. Very, very exciting. I think my unpaid ad today is for plants. I think that you should I think everybody, if you haven't jumped into the live plant game, I think you should do it. We're surrounded by a few here. I love sharing my life. I love being in environments that are full of plants. And it's not even for the oxygen or whatever. I just think they're pretty. And it's just nice to be surrounded by beautiful, wonderful, organic things. So you should go get a plant.
That's a challenge for me. I mean, I can keep pets alive.
Yeah.
I've kept my children alive.
It's great.
But plants are a challenge for me, so I will accept that challenge.
I think you should start with like a succulent. Like a jade.
Yeah.
They thrive on neglect. It's
perfect.
Overwatering is too much love, too much care.
Yep.
Is how to kill a jade. So, all right.
Sounds
Well, Mr. Lathe, thank you for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Looking forward to coming and hearing the next concert. Ooh, actually, what just tell us, when is the next time that someone could come and hear the Youth Chorale Central Minnesota?
The date, whatever the date that sticks out in my mind is October 29th. It's whatever is, I'm sorry. July 20th, that's Saturday. The alumni will be performing. We started an alumni choir weekend where alumni can come back and sing a few tunes. We are Great Hall is booked, so we are looking for a second venue. But go to yccm.org and find out. And then after that, our regular season starts with our first concert on October 29th, actually up in Little Falls.
Okay.
So those of you listening on the northern tier of the podcast, or I suppose anywhere, come to Little Falls and listen to a few choirs from around the area.
Fun. Well, Mr. Lathe, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.